for Madeline. So I'm gonna go back to my slide. So after sharing the poll result, I can see we are so variety of people with a different experience and expert. Looks good. That's good to know for people my presentation. I'm going to introduce who we are. So wait for a second. I'm gonna put that up. Okay, we want to introduce ourselves first. You know some of us, but you don't know all of us. We are all three from the IU School of Social Work. We are closely working with the Pratt Foundation to support training and providing the technical assistance. My name is Saahoon Hong. I'm an assistant research professor at IU School of Social Work, working with the Indiana Family and Social Services Administration's Division of Mental Health and Addiction. My primary role includes the utilization of DMHA's integrative data system for the quality improvement initiatives that supporting the use of outcome management tool in practice. My research interests have focused on quantitative research method, cross-system data analysis, and mental health, also interested in education well-being. So, and most of you already met Dr. Walton. Could you reintroduce yourself?
Sure. We're excited to have all of you here. We initially thought we had a very small group, and so you've kind of blown us away. I'm an associate research professor now at IU School of Social Work and have the responsibility for being the lead on providing the training and technical assistance and research team. Been involved with implementation in Indiana since this all began for us, even before this began. So since 2005, we've been on this journey and gradually built our team that's here today, plus our project coordinator, who I don't know if she's online or not, that would be Stephanie Moynihan. She's the person who keeps us organized and makes us look good. So again, thank you all for being here. And that takes us to Hea-Won.
Welcome, good afternoon too. So I'm also with the Indiana University School of Social Work, and I'm an associate professor. And I've been working with Dr. Walton, Dr. Hong regarding this using the especially ANSA data for the state and as part of transitional research. So excited to be here and to especially share some of the interesting and exciting analysis. So I'm looking forward to having a great conversation discussion at the end of this presentation.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to start with the history of Kitcom in Indiana. I want you, Dr. Walton, turn over this slide.
Sure, some of you are familiar with our story, but we expect that there might be some partners who haven't been with us at workshops in the past at previous conferences. So as I mentioned, we've been doing this for a while. We use both the CANS and the ANSA in Indiana. And this is a cross-system implementation where we have the Behavioral Health Authority as well as child welfare involved, and our Medicaid agency uses data from both the CANS and the ANSA. So we've gone through a lot of implementation stages. When Dr. Lyons this morning in April mentioned that for some of us, we went through all of these phases of implementation, but sometimes it seems like it never changes. I feel that way. And so as needs change, as we learn new pieces, we learn from our own experience, we're always in this cycle of change. The information from our tools are used to inform and actually prioritize Medicaid service packages for Medicaid rehab option, and now for 1915I Medicaid programs. Performance measures tie funding to outcomes. And when we started doing this, from what we understand from our mental health partners, that we were one of the few states in the country to be doing that at that time. So now things have moved on to some other strategies, but that has stayed true for us. We've also built suites of outcome reports and helped to disseminate those across the country with our providers and our state partners. With that, trying to move that from having access to the information and then actually translating that to practice. We're at the stage of looking at new ways to visualize that, perhaps drop it into Tableau and make it more accessible to people and useful in helping them make decisions. So it's a journey for us, as we heard about this morning. I'm very excited as our team has grown to add my partners we all have different skills, different subject matter expertise, and we're delighted to bring to you some of our newest development with Dr. Hong's joining us. We've been able to do some analysis and work with our data in very different ways. And we're pleased to hear this is very consistent with what the University of Kentucky and the PRADE team are looking at themselves. So with that, I'll stop and turn this over so we can learn more about what's being done.
Thank you. I want to quickly acknowledge that all the studies with the CANS data we've got involved in since the 2000, it could not be done without the DMHA full support. So I appreciate it here again. Today we are going to share one of our studies, Latent Transition Analysis of strength pattern among youth and risk for suicide. We're going to say higher risk for suicide attempt or suicide ideation. In this session, first of all, I'm going to start with a brief summary of the demographic information about suicide. Secondly, with the CANS strength item, I'll discuss what is it, so why it is important. After that, the strength patterns analysis for suicide prevention will be introduced by utilizing Latent Profile Transition Analysis. Since the Latent Profile Transition Analysis probably is not familiar to some of us, I will briefly introduce what it is, what is the difference between the factor analysis and latent profile analysis. Then those latent transition analysis, the result for our study will be shared. At the end of the session, we also have another discussion session about the strength pattern and the result from the LPTA model. Regarding the learning goal, we hope you better walk away with a better understanding the variability of strength patterns among youth at risk for suicide by identifying unobserved subgroups or unobserved membership. Thus, also you can identify or having better understanding the subgroup changes during the mental health recovery process and the benefit of latent transition analysis in the CANS ENSA dataset. So what do you know about the suicide? According to the CDC report, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the suicide was the 10th leading cause of the deaths overall in the United States, claiming the lives of over 48,000 people in 2018. For the ages of 10 to 34, The suicide rate was the second leading cause of death among individuals, and I can see using this one. And for the age of is like the 35 up to 54, the fourth leading cause of death among the individual belong to this age range. Specifically, suicide is the second leading cause of death for the college students across the United States, and the number on the rise. So for example, according to state public health record in Massachusetts, 214 college students ages 18 to 24 died by suicide between the 2007 and 2016. It was a 43% increase compared to prior decade. However, the statistics only indicate the total number of deaths. It does not including the number of college students who attempted suicide or who are at higher risk for suicide. So there are a couple of challenges in collecting information about the such risk behaviors, like a suicide attempt, suicide ideation, because of the privacy issue, and then the victims or their families keeping silent, not want to share those information. So according to the one of a study the University of Michigan conducted, it was called the Health Mind Study in 2019. They examined the student mental health. The survey result highlighted that 14% of college students considered suicide over the past year. So this figure also shows age-adjusted suicide rate in the United States from 1999 to 2018 for the total population, and for males and females here, and then total. For example, in 1999, the 17.8 indicate the number of males who have died by suicide for 100,000 population. We can see the stable trend from 1999 to 2006 is very stable, but the number is increasing since 2006 to 2018. We can regarding the total population, the middle line, the median graph showing we can see significant increasing trend from the 1999 through the 2018. For female, the significant increasing identified trend from 1999 to 2019. And then there is a little stable between the 2016 to 2018. This graph showing the differences stratified, the demographic information stratified by gender and age. You can see the disproportionality among females. The suicide rate was the highest for those aged 45 to 64, actually 9.8 for 100,000. Among males, suicide rate was the highest for those aged 75 and older. The rate was 39.9 for 100,000. The statistics about the suicide rates can be shown here by race. There are highest races is American Indian males. 34.8 for 100,000, and the American Indian females also 10.5 for 100,000. So white males showing that the second largest 30.4, while females are also second largest racial group 8.3. On the basis of age-adjusted suicide rate in 2018, the report from the CDC, the different colors present that suicide rates are different from state to state. In the previous slide, we can see the death rate across the state. Data in the figure illustrating the suicide attempt based on data from 2019 National Survey on Drug Use and Health that was conducted by SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Figures present 0.6% of adult age 18 and older in the United States report they attempted suicide in the past year in 2019. Among adults across all age groups, the prevalence of the suicide attempt in the past year was the highest among adults age group 18 through 25 years old. The percentage is like 1.8. From the previous slide, U of Michigan study that I mentioned, pointing out that 14% of college students considered suicide over the past year. So we can see consistent prevalence. The number is a little different, but it's very high among the college student age group. In this figure, among adults aged 18 and older, the prevalence of suicide attempt in the past year was the highest among those who report having multiple races, 2 or more races. So the rate is 1.5. So why we care about the strength pattern? What is it? Someone may have a question about what it looks like. So human service agency traditionally generally focused on interventions on psychological or environmental risk factors, so like suicide or substance abuse. The emphasis on problem or risk behaviors would be criticized in that it leads to cycle of use, dependency on prescribed program, or assigned expert instead of recognizing their unique or individual strengths or resilience. So in this regard, we thus argued the many therapists need to emphasize the nurturing client strengths and the problem solving abilities that can help them to buffer against the subsequent risk factors in the treatment of mental illness. Strengths-based approach focuses on the youth's unique strengths by collaborating with their families and communities to enhance motivation to change and improve psychosocial functioning. The outcome of strengths-based intervention seems usually very much multidimensional. They are including family strengths development, interpersonal relationship, optimism, spirituality, self-esteem, talent, interest, educational or vocational, permanent relationship, care involvement, natural support, and community involvement. All of them listed under strengths domain in CANS. In So hence the suicide risk listed under the child risk behavior domain. A rating of 2 or 3 considered the actionable item, also indicating the need for a safety plan because they describe both suicidal and significant self-injurious behavior. For the practitioner, you may ask a question like, has your child ever talked about wish or plan to die, to kill oneself, himself? Has the youth ever tried to commit suicide? Those kind of a question will be included in the meeting with your client. As you noticed, much of the research on strengths has focused on single limited number of strengths. So traditionally, in the previous study, many of them, for example, the many resilience studies have examined how a single protective factors buffers a negative outcome through moderation model. Specifically, few studies explored the possible strength changes or development of children at the multiple levels in the mental recovery process. So person-centered analysis, like a latent profile transition analysis, will help us, allow us to find a distinct unobserved group of youth who sharing similar attribute that could be associated with a different outcome. So it is also the powerful tool to explore developmental heterogeneity in the target population over time. In the next few slides, I briefly introduce what are the LCA, latent class analysis, latent profile analysis, and the LTA, latent transition analysis models before sharing strengths patterns study that we conducted. So latent class analysis is a statistical approach to identify an observable categorical latent variable based on categorical observed indicators by attributing cases to the value of the categorical latent variable is most probably belong to latent class analysis can be used for clustering. So it's make us easier to make a grouping by using the statistical model. So LCA or LPA does have a series of advantages compared to conventional clustering technique. So for example, we can say the LCA LPA model give us the cluster criterion supported by the underlying statistical model. LCA LPA also provide us the several statistical tests to measure or assess model fit. Those kind of approach also providing the formal criteria to make a decision about the appropriate number of clusters. So this is these figures indicating the differences between factor analysis and LCA or LPA. LCA is similar to a factor analysis, but latent variable is a categorical rather than continuous. So this is a continuous indicating latent variable. So this is one of the example, the typical differences between the factor analysis and the LCA LPA model. So this is the latent variable categorized as a continuous variable here. And then this one is the same latent variable, but categorized as a categorical variable. So in the factor analysis, covariance matrix is analyzed statistically in order to emphasize the underlying latent structure. depending on the type of observed variable, LCA usually referring to models in which the indicator are categorical. Latent profile analysis usually refer to the model which indicator are continuous. So let's see, I'm going to show another one. So figure 2, showing the graphical representation of the latent class model, showing the short distal outcome Y. So although C is considered as an outcome in the figure 1, we are often interested in an effect in the opposite direction, in which the predictor is a latent variable. The C, and the outcome is manifest. For example, we can predict a distal outcome from the latent class membership. In this model, C refers to latent class variable x1 to x1, x2, x3. So refers to manifest indicator of C. And then Y refers to distal outcome. And then if some of you may be wondering about what E stands for. This is a class-specific residual. So this is a statistical analysis to identify the latent class here. I try to simplify the difference between the factor analysis and then latent class and profile analysis. This is the summary of a latent variable model. Both latent and observed variable can be either categorical or continuous, which differentiate between latent variable model. So for the researchers or the person who want to utilize this kind of a model, is often, sometimes it's more difficult to determine whether the latent variable is categorical or continuous compared to other indicator. That means you always need some kind of a statistical consultation from the professional who are interested in utilizing this kind of approach. In practice, the applied researcher should consider whether a continuous categorical operationalization of the construct is supported by the previous research findings, and whether they are more relevant to the research questions. So I'm going to show one more thing. So it's an extension of the latent class or latent profile analysis in the longitudinal manner. That's it called the latent transition analysis. Keep in mind the difference between the latent classes model. I will introduce the brief, the key characteristics of the LTA. So as I mentioned, the LTA latent transition model is a longitudinal version of LCA or LPA. So time 1 point, initial point, we got the latent classes analysis result here. And then another time point 2, you can see the same type of approach to identify the latent classes. So transition in class membership from time 1 to time 2, when C is a categorical variable, that is called latent transition analysis. So in the latent transition analysis, the result section, you will have the latent transition analysis transition probabilities. Figure 5 indicate what latent transition analysis, the transition probabilities. The P's are the transition probability. For example, the P12 is the probability of changing latent class 1 at time 1 point to latent class 2 at the time point 2. So in this manner, LTA is a longitudinal extension of a latent class model and enable us to investigate the dynamic characteristics of the model. So you can see the membership change or the latent class changes across the time. Some development can be represented as the change or transition among latent class membership. The different people can take a different path. So that's the result section we can summarize in our study too. So as an effort to extend cancer answer data utilization, we try to understand diverse or similar strengths of use with mental health disorders because it is critical in that the strengths-based approach lead to mental health recovery, but very few studies have been conducted in identifying patterns of strengths, classifying similar groups, tracking them in their latent classes, and examining the relationship between changed membership and outcomes. So 4 different study objectives we developed. First one is to identify unobserved subgroup of strengths in a population for use, ending behavioral health treatment. The other objective is to examine profiles of use strengths that move into categories that are more or less usable. The third objective is to determine whether subgroups changed during treatment for use with a suicide risk. The final objective is to examine the relationship between membership changes and the outcomes by utilizing latent transition analysis. I'm going to skip this slide, the study rationale. You can all have the copy of my slide. For our studies, the sample include the children and youth who received the mental health services. Also, having the closed episode, the indicator in Indiana during state fiscal year 2019, 391 youths were identified as those requiring intervention for suicide risk. After examining cancer data, they are all rated 2 or 3 on suicide item. The closed episode that included in this study, they might be the indicator of a closed episode because of a service completed, consumer dropped out or opted out, administrative discharge, moving out of service, or the death or incarceration type of the reason. So as you know, the cancer include multiple domain. The strengths domain include 12 items. Among them, we exclude the resilience item, then focus on 11 items like family strengths, interpersonal, optimism, educational, vocational, talent, interest, spiritual, religious, community life, relationship performance, youth involvement with care, and natural support. So as you know, the cancer item based on 4 Likert scale. First, we analyzed the youth strengths at time 1 point as a baseline, and then time 2 considered as a last assessment by utilizing the latent profile analysis and respectively, and examining those trajectory of different latent classes, the membership changes at the end of episode by the latent transition analysis. As I mentioned, with the state fiscal year 2019 data, 391 youths with a serious emotional disturbance were identified as having closed episode of care with the actionable item, actionable rating on suicide item. So among them, 62% were female, majority of them were white, 80%, and 10% of them was black youth. Average age was 16 years old. We used the CANS data for, 5 to 17. Then the average age was 16 years old for this participant for the study. The average days in the system was 402 days. A scatter plot showing the majority of youth average days in the system. They are very close to 500 and below. You can see the high density, below the 500 days across the different ages here. And this is a model fit when we learn the latent profile analysis. We first administered the latent profile analysis and then try to identify an unobserved subgroup among youth with a serious mental illness to determine the model fit of the LPM model. The multiple indices we use, simply mention this is the best, the PIN model indicator, then we choose the time 1 point, we have a 2 classes model, also 2 classes model for time 2 point. If some of you may be interested in the result, how we interpret it, I want to spend more time after finishing our session. So CANS item used the 4-level rating system. In this manner, a high strength group present the lowest score for each item. Based on the LPM model, we found the 2 distinct groups. The mean score is close to 1.1, very close to 1. And the second group is very close to 2. So x-axis present a strength domain, as you see, family strengths, interpersonal to the natural support here. From the LPL result indicated the figure 1 indicated the 2 strengths profile, and then the 39% defined as the centerpiece strengths because those mean score is close to 1. And then buildable strengths group, 61% is categorized as a buildable strengths group here at the time point 1. The rate of centerpiece strengths class was 47.8%, and the buildable strengths class was 52% at the last assessment. For the wave 2, the 2-class model was also selected in both statistical justification that I shared the model fit table. The centerpiece strengths, you can say 48%, and buildable strengths group, you can say 52% here. So we have a 2 time point, different classes, 2 classes from the beginning, and then another 2 classes at the end of the assessment. Among the high proportion of youth, their strengths class like a centerpiece strength remains unchanged. It's 92%. So it means time point 1, they are categorized or they belong to central strengths group. They still remain the same group, 92% of them remain in the central strength group at the time point 2. And then, but you can see the buildable strength group, the 71% of them also remains the same buildable strength group. So it's a negative group membership, but still 71%. And then when you see positive change from here, 28% of them changed the membership from buildable strength to centerpiece strength at the time point 2. This is we can say this is the positive direction, the changes in positive direction. This is a visualization provide the overall membership change over time. As I mentioned, 140 people defined as the centerpiece strength at time point 1, 92% still remaining in the same group at the time point 2, 7.86% changes their membership into the negative direction. And then buildable strength group at the time point 1, total number of them 248. At the time point 2, 28% of them changed into positive direction, while the 71%, almost 72% remains in the same negative membership. So demographic information by membership changes after running a column proportion test. There is no significant differences between the 4 different grouping. This is CS indicating the central strength group. Their membership changed into central strength group at the time point 2. Central strength group changed into the buildable strength at the time 2. So buildable strength to central strength, buildable strength to buildable strength at the time point 2 is keep remaining in the negative membership. And then there is no significant differences among those columns. The subscript letters, all of them A, that means that there is no significant differences among the columns for different groups. And gender, race, they're equally distributed in those 4 different groups. This is a logistic regression. It's like 1, 2, 3 different logistic regression run by our statistical software. So I used the covariate because the gender, race were not significantly associated with the membership or their latent class. So I used the days in the system as a covariate. So it means the length of stay in the system identify the significant effect across time. So specifically we can say the 1 unit increase in days in the system for use with the centerpiece strength at time 1, the odds ratio is being in the centerpiece strength class at the time point 1 decreased by negative 0.0001. So that means the much more positive outcomes can be identified from the shortened period of stay in the system. So I'm gonna describe this result at the summary section again. Another logistic regression was applied to examine the association between actionable ratings in time point 2 and the membership changes. So as I mentioned, there are 4 different membership changes, and then BS, the buildable strength to buildable strength that was used as a reference group. That's why we don't have the statistical estimate here. So when the buildable strengths to buildable strengths as a reference group, those rate, we compared this group compared to buildable strengths and buildable strengths, this group also compared to the reference group. That means the remaining the negative group showing the difference between the negative 1.1, it can be indicated 70% less likely showing the positive change. So that means we're going to use a dependent variable actionable item on suicide. So 70% of them, of the CS and CS, the positive group membership, less likely receive or rated the 2 or 3 on suicide item. It means you can simply say the positive membership changes associated with the positive outcomes. In summary, so the result of the current study pointing out that strength class remains unchanged, like 93% in central strength group and 72% in buildable strength group between the time 1 and time 2. However, subgroups showed us showing the significant movement. 28% moved the positive direction from the buildable strength group. And the people with the membership changes in the positive direction are less likely to being rated 2 or 3 at the end of the episode. That means the positive membership changes are associated with the positive outcomes. Also, we use the covariant model, the latent transition analysis with the covariant model. Length of stay in the system showed a significant impact on latent class, the classes across time. So the short-term period in the system is we can say the short-term period in the system is associated with a positive group membership or group membership change. So yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Kim. Before that, if you have any question, just let me know. You can share your question or comment in this session.
Okay, Dr. Hong, that's a nice summary of the key findings after all very complicated analysis. So thank you. And now would like to open the floor for discussion and questions. So if you can, could you maybe share your thoughts on the implication of these findings for your practice and work? And I know that some of you are the clinician, but some of you guys working for the state. So maybe the implication can be very different depending on where you are working. But we hope that you might have some take-home messages so that you can think about how to apply or what would be the implication for part of your work.
Sorry about that. We have some questions in the chat box. So while people are thinking, Barb asked, is part of the lesson here that we should look at outcomes based on a latent class, high suicide risk, and not on the entire population? So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. So in this analysis, we simply used the suicide item. We didn't look at how those items interchangeably impact to person's mental health issues. So other risk behaviors may be associated with a suicide attempt. Those kind of the combined or the adding more variable in the latent transition analysis, they require more time to get a result, but it's worthwhile spending time.
This was a preliminary analysis to see what might happen. Mm-hmm. Another question, could you use this type of analysis to determine different types of strength combinations that may predict suicide risk outcomes?
Yeah, you can do that. at this point, our data showing the two unobservable the group membership from the time point 1, and then another 2 group membership at the time point 2. But when you look at the actual table, let me see. Yeah, you can see this kind of the families, the different strengths item showing the different fluctuating the mean score. So within this kind of differences, we can analyze the kind of internal analysis within group differences we can identify. So for the strengths group, or for example, if we focus on the build-up strengths group, we can see which area, which item, which the questions more likely the changeable and then more likely impact to the better mental health outcomes. So you can do that.
Okay.
I think the other question I'm seeing in the chat box is whether we can link this information to the different types of program this youth had received, so that we can identify which program can be more effective in terms of building the strengths over time, so that we can really think about the way we do our services.
Yeah, that's the covariant model. So in this model, I use the days in the system as a covariate to examine the differences, class membership changes. So if we have information about a certain type of a program or innovation, we can use the effect size by using the estimate here. So then we can compare which program showing much better the impact on the positive membership through the latent transition analysis. We can do that.
Other questions or any other comments, especially, I mean, utilizing data to enhance our practice has been a big issue. And also we'd like to hear about maybe potential challenges or barriers that you could see when you try to apply this kind of analysis or this finding to your practice. And if you'd like to share some ideas through the chat, that would be great. Or we're open to other discussion. I know that we don't have a lot of time left. So if you like to have some questions, that's something we'd like to follow up, you can just leave some of your comment through the chat, and then we will follow up with you.
Our emails are also, our contact information will be on the last slide, and we'd love to hear your feedback and follow up with us. So Barb asked if we're going to submit this to the data visualization garden. The circles were the easiest to understand. Thanks for that feedback. Okay.
And also I include the syntax that I used for this study. So you can utilize or apply this syntax if you have the M+ program. So you can simply have the same type of the result that I used. When you use your data, the number of latent classes is different, but you can still utilize this syntax for your data. So references here, and then our contact information.
So in the chat, Allison also likes the circles, that they would be helpful to share. And thank you for the code. So